The jaws of the iron trap snapped shut with a harsh crack, echoing through the pines. Isla fell hard into the dirt, pain ripping up her leg as steel teeth clamped her ankle. Her hands scraped raw against bark and soil. For a moment she froze, chest pounding, before panic surged. She knew this sound, made for deer or wolves, not people. Yet here she was, caught like prey. She pulled at the iron but it only cut deeper. She bit back a cry, any sound could carry. Her people had been driven south weeks ago, scattered by soldiers. She had stayed behind, still searching for her younger brother, lost after a raid. Now, alone, without horse or food, she was trapped with no escape. Then came the crunch of boots through brush. Her head whipped up. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, a rifle slung low. His hat shaded his face, his stride unhurried. That calm unsettled her more than a charge. He looked like he belonged here. She thought he'd set the trap. He was here to finish what had started. It was Talon. A cowboy who'd turned trapper to survive after frost ruined his crops. He'd been running trap lines for weeks, hoping for rabbit or deer. Never a person. Never an Apache woman. He stopped a short distance away, his gaze steady, weighing the moment. He'd seen soldiers drag people from these hills, seen townsfolk spit at the sight of an Apache. He knew what she thought, that he was no different. Slowly, he set his rifle on the ground, raised both hands, palms open. His voice came low, steady. "It's for game, not for you. I'll get you out." Isla's eyes narrowed, her body tense, fists pressed to the dirt. She wanted to spit words back, but fear sealed her throat. She watched every move, ready to fight if he came too fast. Talon crouched slowly, keeping his hat low so she didn't have to meet his eyes. His hands worked at the spring. "It'll sting," he warned gently. The jaws released. Pain shot through her leg, but she clenched her teeth and held back a cry. Talon tore a strip from his shirt, bound her swollen ankle with careful, steady hands. No lingering touch, only respect. Isla studied him with suspicion, but confusion too. If he'd wanted harm, he'd already lost his chance. She gave her name in a whisper, testing him. He nodded, repeated it, not perfectly, but with care. Then gave his own. Talon. The forest seemed to hold its breath. She could limp away, risk the wilderness alone. Or follow the stranger who had freed her. Neither choice felt safe. She studied his face, creased by sun and wind, jaw set like a man who'd seen too much and carried it quietly. He offered her his canteen, holding it out without pushing. Thirst won over fear, she drank with trembling hands. He rose, rifle back on his shoulder. "Cabin's not far," he said. "You can walk." Testing her weight, Isla winced but nodded. Fear still gripped her, but beneath it lay a fragile thread of trust. He'd freed her when he didn't have to. That mattered. Together they started down the trail. Talon walked just close enough so she wouldn't stumble alone, but never near enough to crowd her. Silence stretched between them, heavy with calculation, her wondering if he'd betray her, him wondering if she'd bolt. Two strangers, bound by survival, walking into uncertainty neither could escape. Isla wanted answers, who this man really was, why he hadn't taken her life when he had the chance, and if walking beside him meant freedom or a slow walk into captivity. She had seen men who called themselves settlers drag women away, had seen soldiers take even worse. Her mind twisted with dark images of what might come. But the other path was worse, limping alone into hills where both wolves and men hunted. Each step she chose to keep following him, testing if his words matched his actions. Talon knew exactly what churned in her thoughts. He carried his own shame. He'd ridden with cattle outfits that treated men like expendable tools, watched a family of Apaches driven from their canyon after soldiers set fire to their homes. He hadn't lifted a hand then. That memory still burned. But today, at least, he had made one different choice. He had freed her. That mattered, even if it could never wipe the slate clean. They followed the creek, water sliding over rocks, the air sharp with pine and damp earth. Finally, he broke the silence, his tone flat and plain. Cabin small. Just me there. Nobody else. She studied his face, searching for lies. Seeing none, she gave a slight nod. When her ankle gave way on a slope of loose stone, his hand shot forward instinctively. She jerked back, bracing. He raised his palms and stepped away. You lean if you want. If not, don't. It's your choice. Her anger cooled as quickly as it had risen. For the first time, she believed maybe he meant what he said. She hissed against the pain, pushed herself upright without his help, and he let her. Unspoken questions hung in the air. She wanted to ask why he lived out here in solitude. He wanted to ask why she wandered alone, separated from her band. Neither spoke. When the cabin roof finally broke through the trees, Isla's voice cracked the silence. Why trap, cowboy? Her suspicion laced every word, but so did a trace of curiosity. Talon didn't flinch. Winter's mean out here. Frost killed my corn, mare went lame. I hunt to eat. To keep a roof over me. His voice carried no pride, only the weight of survival. They stepped into the clearing. The cabin stood rough and worn, smoke curling from a crooked stovepipe, fences sagging with age. Not the home of a soldier, not the fort of a conqueror, just a place where a man scraped by. It surprised her. He looked more like a survivor than an enemy. He swung open the gate and stepped aside. Go on, he said, letting her pass first. It was a small thing, but she noticed. He had spent the entire walk giving her choices. She didn't thank him, but she walked through the yard. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and old wood. One room only. Bare shelves. A single bed. No hidden weapons. No other people. That answered at least one question: he lived alone. Truly alone. Talon leaned his rifle against the wall. You can sit, he said. I'll cook. Rest that ankle. He didn't move closer, didn't try to close the distance. He knew trust had to be built with deeds, not talk. For the first time since the trap snapped shut, Isla exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The edge of fear dulled into something else, cautious watchfulness, the first step toward believing this stranger might not be danger. The cabin itself was plain, rough pine walls, low ceiling, dirt floor packed hard from years of boots. A single stove scarred black, a plank table, one narrow bed covered with a wool blanket. Nothing hidden. No tricks. Just the life of a man who had cut and built with his own hands. Talon saw her studying it. He spoke without pretense. Ain't much. Everything you see, I built myself. He moved slowly, pulling a tin of beans and a strip of salt pork from the shelf. Survival food, not a feast. But it was honest. Talon didn't ask if Isla wanted food. He simply set to work, because hunger didn't wait for permission. He sliced the salt pork into pieces, dropped them into a black iron pan, and poured in beans. Soon the cabin filled with the smell of grease and smoke, sharp and comforting all at once. Isla lingered near the wall, her ankle throbbing, eyes never leaving him. She thought about staying on her feet, ready to bolt if danger showed itself. But her body reminded her she wouldn't make it far if she tried. Talon noticed her hesitation. He nodded toward the chair. Sit if you like. Chair won't bite. His attempt at humor was stiff, but deliberate, a gesture to show he wasn't her jailer. After a pause, she lowered herself onto the chair, her gaze sharp, testing him. He stayed at the stove, stirring, giving her distance. When the food was simmering, he pulled a small cedar box from a shelf and unwrapped a bundle of herbs. Kneeling by the table, he showed her. For swelling. Old man taught me years back. He didn't force it on her. He left it in reach, letting her decide. She studied it, then gave a faint nod. When he crouched by her ankle, his movements were slow, every step clear. She tensed, ready to shove him away, but his hands were steady, careful. The cool herbs dulled the ache as he bound them with cloth. He leaned back quickly, no lingering touch. Suspicion remained in her eyes, but so did relief. The silence pressed heavy while the beans softened. Finally, she broke it. Why alone? Her voice was quiet, edged with caution. This wasn't idle curiosity. It was survival. Talon set 2 tin plates on the table, his voice flat, the tone of a man telling an old truth. Worked cattle near all my life. Rode with outfits that didn't care if a man dropped dead so long as the herd kept moving. Saw men shot for less than $1. Got tired of it. Found this patch of land, built what I could. Don't belong much in town. Folks don't sit easy with me, so I stay out here. His blunt honesty caught her off guard. She had expected pride, or arrogance, but instead it was bare survival. She weighed his words against the patched roof, the worn tools, the simple table. He wasn't lying. He set the plate before her and waited until she took the first bite before sitting with his own. The pork and beans were plain, but hunger claimed her, and soon her plate was clean. He said nothing, only refilled her tin cup with water before eating his own share in silence. When the meal was over, he cleared the dishes and stoked the stove. That left the unspoken question hanging, where would she sleep? There was only one bed. Her eyes flicked toward it, then back at him, searching. He noticed. Floor's cold. Bed's the only real place to sleep. If it's too much, I'll take the floor. But it's one or the other. There was no command in his voice, only plain fact. She weighed him again, his restraint on the trail, his quiet at the table, his care with her ankle. He hadn't acted like the men she feared. Slowly, she gave a stiff nod. Same bed, she said, her voice tight, more survival than choice. Talon didn't smile or gloat. He only nodded. All right, then. That night, as the cabin sank into darkness, Talon lay on one side, facing the wall. Isla lay rigid on the other, every muscle ready for danger. But he never reached for her, never shifted closer. Only the faint tick of the stove and the rhythm of his breathing filled the silence. Little by little, her body gave in. Though her mind still raced, exhaustion finally dragged her under. For the first time since the trap had snapped shut, she felt something close to safety, not trust yet, but the faintest proof this man might be different. The night stretched long. The stove kept the air warm, but tension filled the space between them. Isla lay awake for a time, eyes open in a faint glow, listening to every sound he made. Talon stayed still at the far edge, his back turned, as if he'd drawn a clear line she could see. He moved only once, pulling the blanket higher, never crossing into her space. That mattered. It told her more than words that he'd keep his distance unless she allowed otherwise. Still, her breathing was shallow, nerves strung tight. A woman sharing a bed with a stranger was never without risk. Her thoughts drifted to her brother, the one she had been searching for before the trap. Would he have trusted a cowboy like this? Or called her a fool for staying? The warnings of her people echoed in her head, built on real blood and loss. Yet here she was, her ankle bound with his cloth, her belly filled with his food, lying in his one bed. Every reason said she should not feel safe. But weariness crushed her doubts. Against her will, her body loosened, and sleep finally pulled her under. Talon lay awake long after Isla's breathing had settled into the soft rhythm of sleep. His eyes stayed fixed on the rough-hewn wall, replaying choices he hadn't spoken of. He'd told her some truth earlier, but not all of it. He hadn't mentioned how many outfits he'd walked away from, how many saloon fights he'd stumbled through, or the nights he drowned himself in whiskey to quiet the ghosts of the trail. Out here, with no one to answer to, he could keep those parts buried. Yet he could feel the weight of her mistrust in every glance, the way her body stiffened at his smallest movement. He couldn't fault her. If he were her, he wouldn't trust him either. The only way forward was time. Consistency. At some point in the night, her breathing deepened, steady and heavy. He risked a glance over his shoulder. In sleep, her face softened, suspicion gone, leaving her younger, almost unguarded. Relief tugged at him. If she could sleep under his roof, even warily, then maybe he had done something right. Only then did he let exhaustion take him. Morning crept in through the cracks, pale light cutting across the cabin. The stove fire had burned low, the air cool but not biting. Talon stirred first. He rose quietly, careful not to wake her, slipped on his boots, and set water to boil. The rich scent of coffee soon filled the room. Isla stirred, blinking, her body stiff from yesterday's strain. For a moment, confusion flickered, until memory returned, and she saw him, not watching her, but tending to simple chores. That steadied her faster than any words. When she finally sat up, he slid a rough slice of cornbread across the table. "Eat," he said plainly. "Easier on a full stomach." She hesitated only a breath before taking it. The bread was coarse but filling. He poured coffee into a tin cup and placed it before her with steady hands. She sipped cautiously, the bitterness sharp, but she didn't put it down. After breakfast, Talon brought out the herbs again and checked her ankle in the daylight. The swelling had eased a little, the skin still red but not as angry. "You'll walk better today," he said, rewrapping it with the same steady care as before. This time she didn't recoil from his touch. Her voice came quiet, curious rather than accusing. "Why didn't you send me away?" He met her eyes for the first time without looking away. "You were caught in my trap. That makes you my responsibility, at least till you can walk steady. Sending you out there alone would have been the same as killing you. I've seen enough killing." She studied him hard, searching for any flicker of falsehood. There was none. His words carried no mockery, no pretense, only plain conviction. For the first time, she gave him a faint nod. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. Talon only returned to his coffee. The rest of the morning unfolded in quiet rhythm. He chopped wood outside, she swept the packed dirt floor with slow, deliberate strokes, determined to prove she wasn't a burden. He noticed but said nothing, giving her the dignity of silence. By midday, the shape of their uneasy truce had formed. She was no longer just the woman he'd freed from a trap, and he was no longer only the cowboy who'd caught her. They were two people forced to share a roof by circumstance, both weighing the other's choices, both wondering what tomorrow might hold. The days that followed began to take on a rhythm neither of them would have called easy. Each morning, pale light cut through the cabin walls, and Talon moved quietly so as not to startle her. He set water to boil, brewed coffee, fixed simple meals of beans, cornmeal, dried venison. She noticed the way he avoided sudden gestures, the way he let her choose whether to sit at the table or stay on the bed, the way he never pushed her to speak before she was ready. Those small mercies mattered more than the food itself. Her ankle was still swollen, but with herbs and rest, it began to hold her weight. When she tried to step past the cabin door, she stumbled once.